All right, so we are recording.
All right, and now I changed my slide. Hang on. Okay. All right, well, welcome. I'm going to share some things that I've learned about getting into college and paying for college, some resources I found and some stories that I hope will be useful. I am not attempting to provide a step-by-step plan, and I don't have any secrets to guarantee admission. But I do have some opinions based on my experiences with my own kids, plus my tendency to research. Things have changed even just in the 4 years between my first and second child applying for college, and I know they'll continue to change, but hopefully some of this will still apply. Creating realistic expectations is one thing that you can do to reduce frustration and maybe even disappointment during senior year. And I want to mention, I'm going to share a list of resources at the end, so don't worry about trying to write down websites as we go. There's a couple I'm going to share, and then I'll share a whole resources page at the end that you can get to from the library webpage and download that has links in it. And I also just want to say there's not one perfect college. There's multiple colleges that would be good for most kids. And there's not just one route to get there, sort of. So when Naomi was a senior, I sort of thought this was the timeline, that junior year and the fall of senior year, you research and visit universities. And then by the end of the fall, you apply for admissions. By April 1st, you get acceptance, and then you apply for scholarships. But it's not that simple. It's much more like a spiral, I think. Things keep coming back around. Campus visits can happen at a lot of different times, earlier, later. Naomi and I visited colleges for her mostly in the fall of her senior year. Aaron and I planned to go to some things earlier, and then we were unable to because of COVID. So there's still some places that he hasn't visited that he's gotten into, and we'll be doing that in the next month, basically before May 1st. There's multiple admissions deadlines as well, and I'm not really going to talk about different types of early admission, but just there are early admission dates that also give you then a decision earlier, and that can be nice, but it's not, the regular admission is fine. I'm just bringing it up because applications and finding out about admissions can happen kind of throughout the year, senior year. And then scholarships of different kinds have deadlines throughout the year, and your research on different universities is always ongoing. It's helpful, I think, to focus on what you can and can't control, and to understand what you can't control. So one of the things you can control as a parent is how much you contribute to the cost once your kids go to college. You and your child can control which universities you visit, and they get to decide which ones they're going to apply to. What you can't control is where they're accepted and how much scholarships or financial aid they get at each place. There's this terminology, safety, fit, and stretch. Sometimes there's different words used, but I think it's really not, it doesn't serve students very well. I'm not sure. I think it may have come from College Board, but safety is, a safety school is like a school that you can easily get into. So there's a lot of advice that says you should apply to some in each category. But the problem I have with that is that safety has kind of an undesirable connotation. It implies an inferior school. It implies that you're worried you won't get into a school that you want to go to, and you're going to have to compromise. And on the other end of that stretch is referring to a selective school with a low acceptance rate that you probably will have a hard time, you aren't very likely to get into. They're probably going to be an expensive school. They get a lot of applicants, and so they have very little motivation to give scholarships and financial aid. And I'm not sure who really benefits from the whole stretch school concept. I know the schools benefit because they get your application fee, and they use the fact of turning away a lot of students to increase their status. I think really what you should go for is that every school on your list should be to some degree a fit, a school that you would be happy to go to and a school that you can afford to go to. Highly selective or stretch schools, I do not think are inherently better. So just the very fact of their selectivity increases their ranking. So what makes them highly ranked schools is that they don't let a lot of applicants in compared to how many they get. Also, their reputation is often built on research grants rather than teaching ability of the professors. A lot of times undergraduates don't get very much time or any time with the most prestigious professors there, and getting lower grades at an elite school is not better. There is some research on who benefits most from going to elite schools, and basically middle and upper class male white students are going to do fine wherever they go. It's kind of interesting that women, the benefit that women get from elite schools is that they tend to marry later and have children later, if they even do. And so they tend to make more money over their career and get farther in their career. But it's really just that they're taking a different path, not that the school prepared them different. They sort of make different choices after going to that type of school. For lower income, lower socioeconomic students that go to highly selective schools, and in their case, they may get a lot of aid to go there. So it may be worthwhile because they will get mentorship and make contacts that they can use throughout their life. And whereas the wealthier students probably have those contacts through their families already, the less wealthy students don't. I think it's really important to start discussing cost early with your students. It can cost anywhere from $80,000 to $350,000 list price for 4 years of college these days. So it's a really big financial commitment. And we often don't talk about financial matters with our children for one reason or another, but it's a good time when you start thinking about college to, talk to them about your family's income and expense situation, and make sure kids don't know how much a month of rent or of mortgage costs. They don't know how much you spend a month on food and things like that. So just understanding the family budget and how much wiggle room there is in that, and whether you're going to be able to support them and to what degree you can help with their college costs. It's a good thing to start talking about that early, and then also talking about what are some of the different strategies your family can use to help pay for their college. And if you talk about that early, then they can realize that maybe it's really important for them to try and get good grades in high school, because it will help, it may help them get better scholarships to a point. Or maybe they really need to get a summer job and save that money towards college. So there's different things that they might want to think about from an early age, and also, or not an early age, but from middle or high school. And it's an opportunity to set their expectations and steer them towards more realistic schools financially for them. Where do you find the cost of schools? On each university's website, you can search cost of attendance, and you'll get something like this. This happens to be from University of Washington. So these things on it: resident tuition, books, room and board, personal expenses, transportation. Each school has to provide this information somewhere on their website. And these are the categories that they have to provide. And also, I didn't know this non-traditional. I hadn't seen this non-traditional student category before, but this is also, they're required to supply these headings. And there's also, I cut off the out of state, but that also goes on there, and graduate tuition. So all that kind of stuff. The tuition obviously is kind of a fixed thing, usually for like 12 to 18 or 12 to 20 credits of full-time course load. And then room and board is an average of the different meal plans and the different dorms. And then the books, personal expenses, and transportation, that's some kind of an average that they come up with. And I'm not exactly sure how they get it, because to me, it seems kind of wildly different between universities. Some of them seem pretty unrealistically low and others are higher. But how much are you really going to pay? Because usually you have some level of scholarship or financial aid at many different schools. So the net price calculator is another thing that each university has to provide on their website. And with that, you have to have your family data handy, and you have to sort of do those one at a time. And they're not precise or binding, but they will give you a useful starting estimate for how much you will actually pay at that university. So we're going to take a look right now at this College Affordability and Transparency Center. This is kind of a portal into a number of other websites that are interesting. And we're going to look at a couple of them later, but I just wanted you to see, here's this one, kind of college financial planning. The state spending charts are kind of interesting. There's one, this college affordability and transparency list. We'll hop over to this one for a second, and you can do this thing. We just have to move a window. There we go. So this, which colleges have the highest and lowest tuition net prices? And this was kind of interesting to me because Colorado School of Mines was one that Aaron applied to. Oops. And it's one of the most expensive, which luckily he's lost interest in it. But I think what this is saying is that they tend not to give very much aid at that school. Like the actual price that people pay to go there is higher than a lot of places. So there's some other places you can go. There's this net price calculator center, which you can go to this and just put in the name of the college that you want to get the net price for, and then it'll take you to that part of their website. Although one of them that I tried recently, it kind of went to a dead end. So it doesn't always work, but unfortunately, there's no sort of one-stop shopping for net price that you can get multiple universities at once. That's something you have to do one at a time. All right, now I just need to get my notes back. Okay. So what are the most, are in-state public schools always the most affordable? Sometimes yes, but sometimes private schools have better aid. And one reason is a concept I came across called buyers versus sellers. So buyers in this case are universities that have not a ton of applicants for the number of spaces that they have. So they're very interested in encouraging strong students to go to their school, and they will offer typically more scholarships and aid. Whereas sellers are schools that have a ton of applicants and so many good applicants that they're turning a lot of them away, and they don't really have very much motivation to offer aid for you to go to their school. So an example is University of New Mexico right now is looking for more students. So they would be a buyer. They've offered Aaron some pretty generous scholarships to go there because they really want to fill up their school. Whereas University of Washington is more of a seller. They turn away quite a few qualified, even in-state students every year. And so he hasn't gotten his aid package from them yet, but I'm expecting it to be little or nothing from them. And then another example of a buyer is PLU has offered him a substantial amount of aid. He could actually go to PLU for a lot less, or for, I'm pretty sure, maybe as much as $10,000 less than going to UW, even though UW is a public school, PLU is a private school, just because, you know, they looked at him and said, we'd love to have him here and we have lots of space. The Western Undergraduate Exchange is another really cool thing. Because you live in Washington, all of these states that are shaded in are part of the Western Undergraduate Exchange. And what that means is that some of the public schools in each one of these states participate And any school that participates, they cannot charge more than 150% of their in-state tuition to students coming from these other states. They do put some, like you have to apply for that. It's considered a tuition waiver, and you have to apply for it, and each school can set its own requirements. So it's usually, you need to have better grades for this. You know, like it's not all the students from Washington that go to one of these schools. So for example, Naomi has a WUI scholarship for, or tuition waiver for Montana State University. Aaron also applied for that, and he actually has better grades than she did in high school, and he didn't get it because right now I think Montana State has kind of become a seller. There's a lot of people wanting to go there right now. And so they, there was a lot stronger competition for the WUI, but let's go there for a minute. We're gonna go, so they have, there's a bunch of stuff at this website, and we're gonna go to the WUI Savings Finder. And you can put in a specific school, but here we're just gonna do an example. I'll put, yeah, I can put in the state of New Mexico, bachelor's degree, and freshman only. And then it gives us a list of schools and how much the tuition would be if you get a WUI scholarship at these schools. So University of Mexico right now is only charging $10,000 tuition, which is less than UW if you went there. And here's some others. That's actually that, and New Mexico State of Mining and Technology are the more expensive ones in the state. Maybe you don't really want to go to Espanola, New Mexico, but if you did, it's under $5,000. So let's try one other. I'm going to switch that state and put Oregon. And here, Oregon State is 15,000. So, you know, that's going to be more than UW, I'm pretty sure, but it's also a lot less than Oregon State out of state tuition. So this is a really good deal. All of these states, let me just do the drop down. And you can see all the states that participate: Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, the Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oregon, Utah, Washington, Wyoming. So that's a lot of, you know, it's not going to be, again, every state school in all of those states. I think, yeah, so Oregon State is on this list, but University of Oregon is not for Oregon. I do remember we visited, Naomi and I visited University of Oregon, and they said, although they don't do the WUI scholarship, they do offer some pretty good scholarships to out-of-state students that have fairly high grades. So sometimes there's more than one way to get a good tuition level at another state's school. All right, we're gonna go back to.
Hey, Ingrid, I saw
Yes.
that there was a question in the chat about what does non-traditional mean for a student?
Non-traditional, that was on the, okay, let me go back. I believe I looked it up. That was on this tuition thing. And so non-traditional, I don't remember the whole definition, but that would be like a married student, an older student. And I think, so the tuition is the same and everything. The only thing that's different that I see here is room and board. And I think I think where they're going with that is, you know, first of all, if you're married, then you're not going to live in the regular dorms, but there's usually some married student housing on campus, but it's probably a little bit more expensive. And also if you're, you know, sort of going back to school at age 40, you probably don't want to live with the 20-year-olds in the dorms. And so again, you're going to be in a different type of housing that's a little more expensive. So I don't know when that got added to things that they have to do. Let me see where I am now. Talked about that. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Okay. Here we are. So FAFSA and CSS, I'm not going to say a lot about this, but both of these are things that come out in October 1st, usually. The FAFSA is free, as it says, and everyone has to fill it out. This is what qualifies you for aid, for any kind of financial aid at any kind of school. And so, I mean, I guess technically you can go to school without filling it out, but unless you're quite wealthy, you don't want to. CSS profile, that's the College Scholarship Service, which certain private universities, typically more expensive universities, do require that you fill out CSS profile, and that is not free. Both of them, you have to put in a lot of personal information. It seems a little bit invasive, that can be confusing when you're filling it out, like what exactly, which number do they want here? And then what you get out of it often feels, you might not agree with what they say you should be able to afford. And the CSS profile asks for a lot more information than the FAFSA, so it's even more invasive feeling. And let's see, the one other thing I was going to say about these is that if for divorced parents, usually only one parent has to fill out the FAFSA, but often the CSS profile takes both parents' income into account. Student loans, I'm not an expert here, but I just have a few comments about student loans. FAFSA is what qualifies you for loans, and these will be listed by schools as part of your aid package, but in my mind, a loan is really not aid because you have to repay it with interest. If you do get loans, the federal subsidized loans are a better deal because the interest is paid for you while you're in school. And often you may qualify for a combination of federal subsidized loans and unsubsidized loans. But, you know, if you're going to do loans to the extent that you can, I would say go for the subsidized ones. And the other thing that's good to know is that accepting a loan, when you get your financial aid package, there will be things that you have to, you know, and you've decided that you're going to go to that school. There's things that you have to kind of sign off on and accept. And when you accept the loan as part of that package or work study, which we'll get to in a minute, accepting it at that stage is not binding. You'll still have a lot of paperwork to do before you get the loan. And it can be, even if you think you don't want the loans, it's useful to accept them, because if something comes up during the year and you find that you do need the loans, you can't go back and get them. You know, say in January, your car breaks down and you have to get a new car, and all of a sudden you don't have enough money that you were gonna put for your parent contribution to your kids' school. Well, if you accepted that loan, then you can go back, you can go at that point, you can contact your school's financial aid office and say, all right, I want the loan now. But if you didn't accept it, then you can't, that's no longer an option. And the other thing is that, let's just say, for example, you qualify for $10,000 and then you have this emergency in January and you decide, yes, I do need a loan, but I only want $5,000. That's fine. You don't have to take the whole amount, that whether you take it at the beginning of the year or later or whatever, you don't have to take the whole amount. You can always take a lesser amount. So there is some flexibility there. Work study, also FAFSA is what qualifies you for work study. And I think this is still not aid because you're working and you're getting paid as you should be. But there are benefits to work study because you're working on campus. It's more convenient. It's going to be more flexible with your school schedule. And there's a certain number of jobs on campus that are for work study students only. So that gives you just more options. So that can be a good thing. Financial aid versus merit aid. This can get a little bit confusing because some schools really only like to give merit aid. So even though you may be, based on your income, you qualify for financial aid, instead of giving you financial aid. They may give you scholarships. And one reason for that is that it just feels better as a student if they say, oh, look, we want you so much, we're giving you a scholarship, versus, oh, look, you're so needy, we're giving you financial aid. So they think it makes people feel better. On the other hand, there's also schools that do not give scholarships and only give financial aid. And the thinking there is that if you can afford to pay, you should, but they want to use the aid they have for the neediest students. So there's just different ways of looking at that. And you might think my FAFSA says I qualify for, at this school, I qualify for $10,000 of financial aid, but instead they gave me a $10,000 scholarship. Can I also have the $10,000 of financial aid? But it doesn't work like that. And then there's a further thing about financial and merit aid, and that's called being gapped. And I'm going to explain that by an example. So this is one that happened to Aaron. One school he applied to, Rensselaer Polytechnic in New York State. It's a private school, and the estimated cost of attendance is $79,000 a year. They said based on his FAFSA, the expected family contribution, so that's what you get from FAFSA, is they come up with an expected family contribution, which would be the same amount at any school you go to. So Aaron's expected family contribution, or EFC, is $15,000 a year. But then they said on the next line, based on institutional methodology used by most private institutions in addition to FAFSA, and what they're really talking about there is the CSS profile. They required us to also fill out the CSS. In that case, they only required my income for the CSS. So I thought we might do pretty well there. But so they said based on that, our expected family contribution went up to almost $25,000 a year. So, I don't really agree with that, but okay, there's more. So they gave him some scholarships, and this is where they gave him almost entirely scholarships rather than other types of aid. And it sounds very nice. They gave him $38,000 of scholarships, which would have been great if they didn't cost almost $80,000 a year to go there. Because of FAFSA, he qualified for a little bit of loan money. So basically, at the end of all that, they said the estimated family cost to attend there for Aaron would be, if he took the scholarships, if he took the loans in addition to the scholarships, it would be $36,000. So just to summarize, based on FAFSA, he should be able to afford $15,000. And they said, but wait, we think you can afford $25,000, but we're going to charge you $36,000. That's called being gapped. There's a gap between how much they know you can pay and how much they're going to charge you. And if you want to go there, you're expected to just figure out however you want to, how to make up that difference. Fortunately, that wasn't a school he was too attached to. So we just said, okay, we're done with you. There's a lot of different scholarship types that I didn't really realize. When Naomi was a senior, I didn't realize how many different kinds there were. There's university specific scholarships. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to, pictures were in my way. So there's some that when you apply for admission to a school, sometimes you're automatically considered for certain scholarships. Then there's some that are separate applications with that university. Then there's also scholarships that are not tied to any university that you can search for online, and those may have deadlines at any time of year. I haven't had a lot of luck finding, my kids haven't had a lot of luck finding those ones, but I'm sure somebody's getting them. And sometimes they can be very specific to different interests or different memberships that you might have. There's the local scholarships that get announced at graduation, and those ones, the thing to know about those ones are that you will have to you won't know about those until graduation. So you'll be committing to a school before you know what or if you're getting out of those. So, and there's a lot of different kinds of eligibility for scholarships. Incoming freshmen, sometimes you have to be an incoming freshman to be eligible for scholarships, but there's also a lot of scholarships for second year and beyond students. And there's other types of eligibility like in-state, out-of-state, different ethnic groups. And then there's single year scholarships. There's a lot that are renewable for 4 years. Usually there's some stipulations like a minimum GPA, and maybe you have to turn in certain things at a certain time of year to continue to get that scholarship. So the main things are, don't miss the deadline, start looking early for scholarships, because that was one thing that happened when Naomi was a senior. We had no idea that there were scholarships that had deadlines in the fall. By the time we found that out, it was February. So we had completely missed those opportunities. And then know the rules for renewal of your scholarships, and realize that scholarships require as much effort as admissions. So kind of, you know, kids get a little burnt out from filling out their college applications, but they need to continue to fill out scholarship applications as well. Holistic review is something that has become more popular. So you might be familiar with some universities, as long as you have a certain GPA or test score, you're automatically in. But holistic review is kind of a way to look at a student beyond just their academic record and test scores. So it has, it's kind of good and bad. And both scholarships and university admissions often use some form of holistic review. What usually goes into that is academic rigor. So that is what you took in high school and whether or not you took advantage of things like AP classes, honors classes, college and the high school. But they really look at, part of academic rigor is what was available to you at your high school. So you're not going to be in that category. You're not going to be compared to, you know, if you're at Lopez and there's only 2 APs or 3 APs possible that you can take, they're not going to compare you to somebody who went to Bellevue High School that has, like, who knows, 20 different APs. So academic rigor has to do with your specific high school and what you took advantage of and your grade point average. SAT and ACT scores, those are becoming less important. There's a lot of schools that are test optional or test blind. Test optional means it's not required. Test blind means that they won't look at it. They don't care how well you did. They're not going to look at it at all. Activities, those can be sports, music, different clubs and activities that you were in. Even a job is considered an activity. Any volunteer service that you did, things like that. 4-H, that's an activity. And activities show how well-rounded you are, basically. Letters of recommendation. Some schools are now not taking letters of recommendation on the theory that larger high schools, a lot of the teachers and certainly the counselors don't really know students well enough to do a good letter of recommendation. And so they think it sort of evens the playing field to just not take them at all. And then essays are there to show a student's personality and give an opportunity to provide some additional information that's not anywhere else on the application. So the good news, bad news of holistic review is that it is an attempt to look at the whole student, not just their academic record. And it does mean that applications are reviewed by people, not computers. On the other hand, sometimes with holistic review at some schools, they might spend as little as 8 minutes looking at your student's application that they spent, you know, hours and hours sweating over. And then, for example, at UW, they don't look at test scores and they don't take recommendations. So that leaves you with academic rigor, activities, and essays. And then it starts to feel a little bit like it's not very much, and it starts to feel a little bit like figure skating scores. I think that you know, there's some people that are just so impressive, you can totally see why they got in, and there's other times that you're just wondering, why did one student get in and not another? And that leads into additional admissions considerations. So every university has its own mission, and so it's going to have a different idea of who their ideal student is. And they all have institutional priorities, which can vary from one year to another. So some years, a particular university might be looking for more women entering STEM majors, but another year they might be looking for, you know, to fill certain positions on their baseball team or certain instruments in their orchestra. And you have no way of knowing these kinds of things. So this is not something you have any control over. And then some universities really like to craft their incoming class in one way or another. They maybe want to have some students from every state in the country, or maybe they're trying to get more diversity. There might be a lot of different things that go into crafting a class, and part of that has to do with who else is applying. You don't know that whatever university you're applying to, maybe they really want more students from Washington, but for some reason, lots of students from Washington applied that year. And you might be well qualified to go there, but there were just so many other people in that category. Or, you know, maybe you play trombone, but they have plenty of trombones, so they're not looking to bring more trombonists that year. So these are just things that you have no control over and probably no knowledge of. So here, this is not really meant to be a checklist, but this is some of the things that colleges look for. Only high school activities count, first of all, on your applications, not middle school. You can show commitment through longer participation in some of your activities, and that doesn't need to be all of them, but having done at least one or two activities for multiple years is good. They're always looking for leadership, and so if you find some leadership opportunities, those don't have to be, they're really sort of what you might think of as standard, like high school government, or being the president of some club that you're part of, or being the baseball captain or whatever. Leadership can also be just something that your student sort of took control of and stepped up and helped organize. As long as they can explain what it was that they did, what their role was, and how that was beneficial, they can call that leadership. Community service is usually required, and it's good to encourage them to do something that they really care about, whether it's community service or the clubs and other things that they do. The more meaningful it is to them, the more useful it's going to be to them overall. And basically, I think it's better to think of it as preparing for college and preparing for life, not preparing for the applications. They should be doing things that they care about, and things that they enjoy, and that they, you know, do with their friends, and that they get mentors out of. So selecting universities of interest, there's really two categories of questions, I think. What do you want in a school, and where do you want to live? And there's a lot of things that maybe fall under that, and like, what are you going to major in, and do you want to live close to home or far away? Do you want to go to a big city or a smaller town? College Navigator is a resource I want to show you, because it has a lot of different options you can search. So you can even search on tuition and fees. You can search on enrollment size, campus setting. So if your student wants to go to a rural setting, and there's SAT scores, there's distance learning, religious affiliation, there's just all kinds of things you can put in here. And you can put in, you know, there's I'm trying to see, where is it? You can put the state, the name of school, but the major. So you can put in, if they're really interested in certain majors, then you can, you know, even under here, under each one of these, there's more, and under some of these, there's even more. So you can get very specific in this search tool. And also I like that it's not a College Board thing. All right. Visiting schools. You can find out so much more by visiting, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. It's kind of nice. Earlier in high school, you might have an opportunity to send your student to a summer camp at a university where they're there for a week and they stay in the dorms, and they might have some activities or classes with the university professors. And that's a great way for them to kind of get a feel for that particular campus, but also just what is it like being on a campus. It's hard for them to imagine that. So about 2 years before Naomi was a senior, I sent her to Cougar String Camp at Washington State University as a summer music camp there. We had met one of the teachers from that music camp and looked it up, and it wasn't very expensive. And, you know, she kind of decided that she didn't really like the WSU campus, but it gave her a better idea of what to look for and what she liked and didn't like on a college campus. You can also visit universities when you're on vacation or visiting family on any kind of a trip. You might be able to go to a sporting event or a concert or a museum, or just walk around on the campus to get an idea. And the same, you can visit some of the nearby campuses to us in Seattle or in Bellingham, or wherever you happen to be nearby. And it's sometimes useful to contrast two different universities. You often learn as much from the ones that you don't like as the ones that you like. But by contrasting by going to two, you know, not too far apart, sometimes you see, I remember when Naomi and I, the first college trip we took, the first college we went to, it was a small, expensive private college. And it just seemed so cool, all the things they showed us on the tour. And we're like, wow, they have this, they have that. Then we went on the next tour and we realized a lot of those things, every school has a lot of those things, we just didn't know it. And then, you know, so sometimes you find out what's common between colleges, and you also find out what maybe is special about a certain college. Before you go, you have a little homework to do. You can find a lot on the university website. And these days, because of COVID, there's virtual campus tours, and there's a lot of other virtual offerings. You also probably want to schedule an in-person tour in advance to make sure there's room. And but when you have a junior or senior, you might want to schedule a visit with a professor or ask to sit in on a class to find out more. And these that I put here, these are just some of the virtual offerings on the UW website. There's a whole lot more. When you're at a school visiting, besides going on the tour, and you don't have to be a senior to take a college tour, a campus tour, it's very useful to spend some time on campus beyond the official tour. Sometimes Naomi and I found out more just walking around campus. We would go hang out in the music building in the late afternoon or evening and see who's there, what's going on. Is it a lively place? You know, we would maybe pick out a dorm and then walk from the dorm over to the music building or to another building that she thought she would have classes in, eat a meal at the dining hall. If you can attend an event on campus, and then just driving around the area near the campus is also useful. Going on these tours, especially, is when you sometimes find out what your kids care about that you didn't think of or you think is kind of funny. Aaron has commented about, you know, certain campuses that he didn't like how they looked, or he did really like how they looked from the architecture standpoint, also the landscape and what the surrounding area looks like, the recreational opportunities. Obviously, kids are going to care about the dorms and food. And all this is not trivial because they will be living there for 4 years, so they should like it. they're going to care. Often some kids really want to be close to home, or they want to go as far away as they can. They might really be attracted to study abroad, which pretty much every university has that, but they might want to see exactly what certain universities have in that area. They might really want someplace that looks like home, even though it's not home, or they might want to go to someplace that's completely different. So, I found out taking Aaron to University of New Mexico that I thought he would love it there. And he complained that it was too sunny and there weren't any clouds in the sky and there were not enough trees. And, I didn't know that that was something that was important to him, but it turns out he wants to be someplace that looks kind of like here. Party or not party. Both of my kids at different times have said they heard such and such a school is really a party school, so they know they wouldn't want to go there. And I explained to them that nobody makes you party. You're going to find your own friends, and the reputation is not everybody's experience at a university. And then Naomi's biggest concern was, could she bring her horse? So she did not want to go to a university that was in a big city. UW wouldn't have worked out for her. Some other factors you might want to consider are, so some of the things that are associated with satisfaction and with, good outcomes in the end, or how much contact students have with professors or mentors outside of class as well, kind of socially. And a lot of schools talk about their student to teacher ratio, but that's an average, which includes even graduate students. So one of the questions you might want to ask is, what is their average freshman class size? And who are the teachers that are teaching freshman classes? Are they professors or are they graduate assistants? How's that handled? Freshman year is the year that the largest percentage of students drop out. So it's really important to have a good freshman experience. And then undergraduate research, internships, and co-ops, these are things that are gaining popularity and that are really useful to good outcomes. Adjunct professors, they can be a good thing because maybe they're working in their field as well as being professors. But sometimes when there's a lot of adjunct professors, that can be kind of a red flag that the university doesn't value their professors very well. And the adjunct professors sometimes come and go a lot. Multi-term projects like a senior project, that's a good thing to look for. And then over here, things like campus security, career centers, mental health centers, all schools have these, but you might want to see how good they are at any given school. Support for queer, first generation, other kinds of student groups, whatever is applicable to your family. And a breadth of majors and departments. You really want to have not just strength in one major, because very often your student is going to change their mind either before they start school or within their first year or two of being there. How many schools should you apply to? Well, applying to more can help you find better scholarships and aid, but applying to fewer allows you to focus on writing better essays and scholarship applications. So there's really not one answer to this. Naomi applied to 2 schools. She applied to the one that she went to, and that was really the only one she wanted to apply to, but she had qualified for a college advisor online who really pushed her to apply to a stretch school. So she picked one, applied to it, didn't get in, and didn't really care. Aaron has applied to 11 schools. And I think we probably might have pared that list down a little bit if we'd been able to do college visits sooner. And I think he sort of got a little bit worn out from doing all the essays, and some of his scholarship applications that came up right after his admission applications, he maybe didn't work on as hard as he could have. So there's pros and cons to different numbers. I suggest not getting attached to one school, especially early on, because if it doesn't work out, maybe that school just doesn't give very good aid. It's good to have a number of schools on your list so that you're not terribly disappointed if one doesn't work out. Make sure you have several financial fit schools on your list. I like to talk about financial fit, not just, obviously it needs to be a good place for your student, but if you can't afford for them to go there, then it's no use. And if you start looking with a wide net and then narrow your prospects based on good fit rather than advertising and reputation. And then it's always good to have at least one and preferably more adults that can talk to your kids, because during the process, they're going to get tired of hearing what you have to say. And just it seems like a silly reminder, you're not the one going to college, but sometimes even I get pretty excited about some place that we visited, and it turns out that that's not the right place for Erin. So your job is to listen, to support and assist and advise, to be patient and positive and realistic in the process. Their job is to do most of the college search work. That's something you can help with, but they need to do all of the application work. You can proofread, you can make some suggestions, but they need to be doing that work. They need to be asking for help as needed, and they get to make the final decision. And finally, there's more than one good fit school for every student, and you should prepare for college, not worry just about the application. There's a lot of different search strategies that can end in success, and don't be too focused on how much better. I hear sometimes from both of my kids, oh, this other, I don't look very good compared to this other student, but just, it's important for them to figure out what makes them unique, what makes them special, and focus on that and just do their best, be their best self. And it's a family project if you approach it as an adventure and celebrate along the way. It's important to celebrate the little things, celebrate the last application finally getting turned in, and celebrate when they get admitted, even if it's not really the school that they wanted to go to, because there's a lot of, it's quite a roller coaster. All right, I'm going to take you to the resources. So this is maybe, oh, there it worked. And actually I'm going to take you to, it's within the post. Let me go back. I guess, oh, I see why. Well, it's at the bottom of this. You can click on it. You should be able to download it. And then, so the College Navigator website is on here, College Affordability and Transparency. I was going to show you College Scorecard, but that one's, this is a good one for comparing different schools. Actually, I'm going to go there just for a minute. So you can put in a school. I'll just do University of Washington. Every school has the same, well, we can look at Western Washington, it doesn't matter. Every school has the same sort of basic information. So like Western Washington, 74% graduation rate, average annual cost is $16,000. Median earnings for graduates is $54,000. And then you can go down here, you can see all the fields of study that they offer. And there's more detail about the costs by family income. So you can see what, with your family income band, what the average cost is. And then you can go to the net price calculator from there. The graduation retention rate, or the graduation and retention. So students who return after their first year, 82%, and that graduate after, doesn't say here after how many years, but they're, I guess 74% graduate. Outcomes after 8 years, 74% graduated, 17% transferred, 19% withdrew. Financial aid and debt. So the average debt of students that graduated from that university. Typical earnings. And here you can also put in a specific degree, because typical earnings for the entire university is not that helpful, but you can, put in a field of study and see what the typical earnings are. The student body, the diversity, how many are full-time and part-time, and test scores and acceptance. So, and then the other thing you can do on this website, you can do compare, and then you can put in other schools, and then you can kind of see all those factors side by side. So that's kind of an interesting thing to do. But also I would say, use your critical hat when you're doing that too, because for example, I was comparing University of Washington and University of New Mexico and the average income. So I think somewhere on there, it says something about where a lot of the graduates live. A lot of the graduates of University of Washington stay, of any university, a certain amount of them stay in the area. So salaries are just higher in Washington than they are in New Mexico, because cost of living is a lot higher in Washington than it is in New Mexico. So when you're comparing some of those things like salaries, you can't just do like a straight, oh, look, you make a lot more money when you go to University A than University B, because your, like your sort of cost of living and your quality of life are not going to be the same in all situations there. All right, so that's the last thing I wanted to show you. Are there any questions?
Wow, that's so much information, Ingrid, and there's so many great resources that, I mean, I didn't know about because I haven't really started thinking about college, but I think that collection of resources and the document that you made is going to be really helpful for people for years to come. So thank you for putting.
I want to show one other thing in that now that I think of it. Now I can't see my tabs very well.
I do notice that the parents that are here have, I think, primarily middle school students. So I imagine they're just feeling really prepared.
Now I can't find my list. Where is it? Oh. Oh, I think I must have gone away from it when I clicked. So here, let me. Okay.
Ingrid, I wonder if you would consider modifying this talk to be directly for middle schoolers. It was super helpful for me to hear this stuff, but
okay.
I know that my child certainly hasn't begun to wrap her head around any of this, and
yeah,
be kind of a different level to speak to middle schoolers, but I think it'd be super useful for her to
I could think about that. And maybe if you helped me think through, I'm past middle school kids now. So
yeah. No, I'd love it. But just some of the things you said about how they consider their high school activities in terms of college applications. And I think now is really the time to start.
Yeah. And middle school is a great time to think about, what do you like to do? And then what do you want to explore in high school? And really, you don't have to. I know sometimes kids get really stressed, like, oh, I have to have a sport and I have to have something else, and it's better if I do 2 sports and I should really do this other thing. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to be amazing at everything. It's more important that you find the things that are meaningful to you, that you care about. Because when you go to write your essays, you want to talk about something that really mattered to you. So I just want to, before I forget, so there's these websites here, but also I put the Friday Harbor resources on because I kind of like them. And those are the ones that I somewhat am familiar with. So this is the Friday Harbor Guidance Office website. And there's 3 different presentations. There's one for junior parents, one for senior parents, and one for seniors. So all of those are, past where you are, but they have things in them that I didn't attempt to cover because I can't do everything. And they're, these are done by college counselors. So, and they also have here some financial planning resources. They have college search options that they have a bunch of, I didn't put all of these things on what I put. So there's more places to search for colleges and search in different ways. And they also have the scholarship search options. So they have some links to different scholarship searches here that are probably useful. I haven't used them all myself, but I just wanted to include this because this is like a portal to more information.
Ingrid, can I ask a question about scholarships too?
Yes.
When I was, it seemed like if you got scholarships, it first went to reduce the amount of financial aid you got from the school, and then, you know, theoretically, if you reduced all that down to nothing, then you would have, I guess, more money on top of that from the scholarship. But it just didn't seem to be actually super useful unless you were getting a heck of a lot of scholarship. Do you have any sense if that's still the case, or are scholarships treated a little differently now?
I think there's a lot of different scenarios, really. So one word is stackable. Some scholarships are stackable and some are not. So sometimes if you get a certain scholarship, it will supersede your other it'll like knock off your other scholarships. Like if you get, this is one example that makes sense. If you were to get, you know, a lot of universities have something that's sometimes called a presidential scholarship that's pretty hard to get, and that it pays all your costs. So let's say, and usually that comes out a little bit later in the year. So maybe you've applied for a few, maybe you got a WUI scholarship and a music scholarship, and then you get the presidential scholarship. They're going to take the WUI and the music scholarship away because you already got everything covered. So not everything is stackable, but there's scenarios where it's not a full ride scholarship, but it's still not stackable with some of your other scholarships. And there's another term that I heard the Friday Harbor counselors say. It wasn't being gapped, it was something else, where it can happen like the scholarships that you get at the end of the year at graduation, those could potentially knock off some of your financial aid that you already got. But she didn't really explain when that happens and when it doesn't. It seemed like it was a very you know, sort of a case by case thing, that there's not a blanket rule that applies. So I think I can't really fully answer your question, except that, you know, it would be different at different schools. You'd kind of have to talk to each school's financial aid office about that. And a lot of them are, you know, I haven't tried this out myself, but the financial aid offices do say, like, call us, talk to us, even if once you're admitted, if you have any questions in the aid, you know, along the way. And some schools, even the financial aid office will talk to you before you're admitted. They'll even help you figure out, like, what could I apply for? How affordable could this college be for me? I think they're getting a little bit more, I don't know the word, approachable or proactive, and trying to help people because the costs just are so high. And I think it's just super frustrating that you have to, you know, you apply to colleges without any idea really how much you're going to pay. And you get sometimes you get your acceptance and your financial award letter, your, you know, financial package. Sometimes you get them together, but other times you get acceptance and then you have to wait a couple days or even a couple weeks or a month or more before you get your award letter. So you're like, great, I got in, but I don't know if I can go there.
Well, since it is after 7, I just want to see if there are any more questions. And if not, we can wrap up here. I feel, oh, does Veronica have a question?
Claudia's here?
Claudia was here, but I don't see her anymore.
Oh, really? I see her name.
Oh, do you? Oh, okay.
I'm here.
Only I want to say thank you for all
Aquí
the.
estoy, Vero.
Ok, thank you, Claudia. Solamente les quiero, no tengo preguntas ahora, pues ya ves que te dije que nomás había entrado para ver la información un poco y darme una idea. Y pues solamente agradecerles por el tiempo que tomaron para darnos toda esta información y les agradezco por tomarse también el tiempo a pesar de que somos tan poquitas personas.
Ingrid, she's just saying so much for putting us together and spending to do that. And she's very appreciative of it. And she said, you know, seems like you put a lot of work to it. She's sorry that there were so few people.
Well, since we recorded it, hopefully there will be more people.
I think that was it, Vero.
Dime. Claudia.
I guess that's it.
Great. Well, thank you, Veronica and Mary and Claudia for being here. And thank you, Ingrid, for putting all this together. The recording will be made available probably starting tomorrow. So feel free to spread the word to other parents you know. And maybe we can work on coming up with something that's like a lighter version of this for middle school kids.
Yeah, thanks so much, Claudia. It was great to just have a spot to begin thinking about this
Yeah.
enormous thing that I've avoided thinking about till now. Yeah, and I'd love to try and help with whatever it would take to get it translated into middle school language.
Okay.
Okay, you guys, well, have a wonderful evening.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Hey, Ingrid, be sure that
Yes.
you save on the website where you're putting the PDF document. Right now, it's not saved on there. Like if I go to the website, I don't.
Oh,
see it.
okay.
So just make sure you save your draft so that it shows up on the screen.
Yeah, I forgot to save in WordPress.
Yeah.
Okay, so you saved the recording?
Oh, yeah. Let me stop recording. There we go.